sectors to ensure we understand what's happening for you and your customers at this time. During these roundtables, we have sought to ensure we make time to hear directly from you so that our decisions are underpinned by what's happening on the ground. We've also shared information with you about the impact of the pandemic on Victorian households and small businesses, and this includes information provided by you as well as consumer surveys. Today we want to continue with that formula of listening and sharing, as well as explore some key questions about how we should respond in the short to medium term. If you haven't already, please take a few moments to log into Slido. The instructions are in the Zoom chat that David's put there, so I hope you can see it there, so that you can contribute to the conversation. We're using this today to see if that will help you to engage with us and put some comments on there. And also some housekeeping to start with, as per normal. Please note we're recording today's session. This is for us to go back and make sure we've captured all the input we can get from today. We may use a grab or two on social media, but only of Commission staff and not of participants. Please keep your microphone muted when you're not speaking so that we can avoid any feedback and background noise. And in the interim, apologies for any children in the background when I have my microphone not muted. To answer our questions, please use Slido or contribute later in the feedback session. The instructions were sent around with your attendance confirmation. They're also in the chat function on the left of your screen. If you do want to ask a question at any time, please raise your hand in the chat bar at the bottom of your screen and I'll try and capture that. We'll certainly get around to as many questions as we can during the session, but if we don't get to yours, we'll respond via email over the next couple of days. So today we have a special guest to welcome to the roundtable, Minister D'Ambrosio, who I'm pleased to say will be addressing the roundtable, and I'll introduce her formally shortly. Before we get to your address, Minister, I'd just like to introduce my fellow commissioners and senior leaders from the Commission. If you could turn on your cameras and give us a wave. My fellow commissioners, Satish Bajani, Simon Corden, and Rebecca Billings. Our Director of Energy, Sarah McDowell. Our Director of Price Monitoring and Regulation, Marcus Trudden. Our Head of Strategic Communication, Michelle Bryan. Our Senior Regulatory Manager of Energy Reform, Aaron Ewan. And our Senior Regulatory Manager of Compliance, Con Sigonis. And just noting our CEO, John Hamill, is an apology today. And I would like to welcome around 30 representatives from energy businesses of all sizes from Victoria, as well as peak bodies. So I'll quickly run through the organisations represented. My apologies for any omissions, as we did have a few late acceptances. From energy retailers, we have AGL, Alinta, Energy Australia, Lumo Energy, Red Energy, Origin Energy, Simply Energy, Momentum, Tango Energy, Power Shop, First Energy, Clover U, Lycian Energy, Glowbird Energy, Power Club, Wind Connect, Next Business Energy, Blue NRG, Energy Locals, Amasim and Sumo. I hope I haven't forgotten anyone's name there. Distributors, we have Gemina, City Power, Powercor United Energy, AusNet Electricity and Gas Services, Australian Gas Networks, Multinet Gas. I hope I haven't forgotten anyone there too. Industry peak bodies, we have the Australian Energy Council and Energy Networks Australia, I understand. In terms of observers today, we're pleased to have the Energy and Water Ombudsman Victoria joining us today. Hello, Cynthia, as is the Australian Energy Regulator, along with representatives from the Department of Treasury and Finance and the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning. Thank you for giving up your time to I think I might have been on mute then, Anne. Yep, I'll start that again. So to introduce today's special guest, we have the Minister for Energy, Environment and Climate Change and Minister for Solar Homes, the Honourable Lily D'Ambrosio. Minister D'Ambrosio has represented the electorate of Mill Park since 2002 and was elevated to Cabinet as Minister for Community Development in the Brumby government in 2010. Minister D'Ambrosio has held the energy portfolios for the Andrews government since December 2014, and before that was Shadow Minister for Energy going back to December 2010. So you might say the Minister is somewhat familiar with the energy sector. Minister D'Ambrosio has indicated she will be able to take a few questions today after her address. So while we hear from the Minister, feel free to get your questions ready. Thank you and welcome, Minister.
Thank you so much, Kate. I'm imagining that people can hear me.
Yes, we can, Minister.
Thank you so much, Kate, and I very much appreciate your welcome and the opportunity to say a few words during this roundtable. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm actually located, and that is the land of the Wurundjeri people. And my respects go to all elders present and any who may be amongst us here throughout this roundtable. I do want to thank you, Kate, and your team. There's been a considerable amount of work, and that continues, of course, to see us through some very, very challenging times, to understand the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic as it impacts Victorian consumers. And I'm very, very thankful that you're utilising a variety of different approaches to engage with all industry players and stakeholders. So thank you. And certainly, by way of just some updates, I'd like to perhaps just reflect on some of the information that is available to us in terms of the more recent impacts of the coronavirus on consumers, and certainly with the recent stage 4 restrictions that is certainly seeing some additional levels of anxiety and stress, financial stress for consumers here in Victoria. And just reflecting, I think, on the latest data that was released by the Consumer Policy Research Centre, which indicated that around 31% of Victorian consumers are concerned about their ability to pay energy bills. And that is at the higher end when we consider that the average across Australia is at around 27%. Even 27% is quite high, but certainly in Victoria we can see that there's the, I think, added impact on people's concerns, if you like, in terms of their ability to keep on top of their energy bills, and certainly lockdown would be, I imagine, contributing to that. I do want to reflect on the fact that all of you have been, and I do want to appreciate all of your willingness to adjust to these new circumstances and providing the necessary support to your customers who are experiencing financial hardship, and some of whom this might be a very new thing in terms of financial hardship. And I certainly would encourage you to continue to be proactive in informing your customers of the availability of your financial hardship plans. We know, though, of course, that earlier opportunities for people, for consumers, to be able to engage in financial planning, hardship planning with retailers in particular, give them a greater opportunity to be able to pay their bills ultimately, and that's good for everyone all round. And ultimately, it's about staying connected too. I do want to also thank all of you for your work in not actioning disconnection that may impact customer health and safety. And I do want to acknowledge the Essential Services Commission's role in this. And we know that these are very trying times. We know that where there is an absence of disconnections in the normal way, it could mean that there is a deferral of the impact, and that is not lost on us or on any of us, and I'm sure that's the case. But I think it does enable us to consider ways of better preparing consumers ultimately for when restrictions do ease, and allow consumers the best opportunity possible to stay connected, knowing, of course, that disconnections lead to many other consequences for customers. just want to perhaps just touch on three things very quickly, not to eat up too much of your time, if I may. And one of them, of course, is just to report on the announcement that I made back in May, where the government had agreed to provide $3.7 million in support for community organisations to help connect energy customers, to help them with experiencing hardship and giving them support to manage their energy bills. And these programs are now in place, which is really terrific, and providing much needed assistance to Victorians who are struggling with their energy bills. Some of the program that's been funded also coincides with the Victorian Government's advertising campaign, which went into the market this week. And that's reminding customers that there is support available from their energy retailer. And those campaign materials are being translated into about 20 languages. And importantly, of course, is the funds also help towards targeting the most vulnerable households, knowing their rights, and also, of course, encouraging them to access the support that is available to them under the payment difficulties framework. And the first of that first program that's been funded in the package to that end is being delivered by the Consumer Policy Research Centre. They're providing online training on energy hardship supports to around about 1,100 frontline community workers. And you will all know, of course, that consumers' inability or difficulty in paying or meeting their energy bill often is very much wrapped up in many other complications and difficulties within their personal circumstances, and often frontline community workers see all of that, and certainly they see the impacts in terms of inability to pay energy bills. And so providing the necessary online training to them to be able to get consumers accessing the payment difficulties framework and the financial hardship plans of retailers is an important way to get people connected. There are a number of other elements of the package, funding an additional 10 full-time equivalent financial counselling positions through Consumer Affairs Victoria's financial counselling program, and that is and also, of course, the Brotherhood of St Lawrence, the Australian Energy Foundation, Uniting Victoria Tassie, and Behaviour Works Australia, establishing a network of energy experts to provide tailored one-on-one bill support to vulnerable Victorians experiencing hardship. So that money's been rolled out. The programs are now in action and delivering on improvements for energy consumers. More broadly, if I may just get you up to date with the delivery of our Energy Fairness Plan. Obviously, it's a very big plan that we announced before the last state election. There are waves of reforms that are coming through as part of that plan, some of which Central Services Commission is responsible for. Others of it require legislative change. So whilst the sitting of Parliament has been presented some difficulties there, we are still progressing the legislative reforms, and my department will be in touch in the coming weeks just to confirm timelines for the legislation. And just as a reminder around the elements of the fairness plan that will need to be captured by that legislative reform. Just lastly, I just want to quickly touch on the ESC's proposed additional hardship support measures. And I note that the ESC has put out a draft decision on proposed utility hardship supports for residential and small business customers. And I do want to make it really clear that our government fully endorses the ESC's work on this. It's really terrific work. I think it's well balanced, and I think it's important that the right balance is struck here. And I'm very pleased that the ESC certainly has reflected that in that draft decision. Certainly I look forward to that reaching its end point. No doubt that draft decision is out there because of engagement and consultation opportunities, and I hope that you've all taken that opportunity to do that. So can I again just thank you all. Kate, can I thank you very much for the opportunity to say a few words. I think that there's been a fantastic level of engagement, sharing of information that probably hasn't been done before, and that's not a criticism of anyone, but it is a testament to the fact that in unprecedented times, we are all prepared to take unprecedented steps to get through these really difficult times, and hopefully to get through it in a way that mitigates to the extent that we possibly can the adverse impacts on consumers, and of course, and that includes, of course, businesses out there, but also the businesses that you run yourself. So I really do want to thank the ESC for doing being the steward of all of that, and certainly reaching out across jurisdictions too, and to the AER in that, because there's been a lot of good, strong collaboration on that in that regard. So thanks again, Kate.
Thank you very much, Minister. Really appreciate your time and your reflections and support for all of us being here today around the table. For me, I think, Minister, it's so important to show how we're working together, as you said, government, the regulator, industry, the community sector, to make sure we're supporting households and small businesses at this time. So it's great to have those shared visions, I suppose. Minister, you'd indicated you'd like to take a couple of questions, so I wonder if you've got enough time to stay with us for a little longer. Great. To warm things up, I thought I'd ask the first question and then kick off to see if there's any questions from the floor. Minister, while we're still quite clearly in the middle of the biggest health and economic crisis to engulf the world since perhaps the Spanish flu nearly 100 years ago, it's pretty hard to see the future at this point in time, but often government and regulators alike are expected to be able to see what's coming around the corner. So, Minister, what do you think will be the biggest challenge for us in the year ahead? It's a big question.
Yeah, look, I'm imagining, I'm not sure if that question is restricted to our particular sort of energy space or broader still. I think the biggest challenge, I think, will be how, and despite the fact that we would all hope that a vaccine is with us tomorrow, it won't be. And I think really the single largest challenge will be, notwithstanding the aim of all of us getting over this really intense spread of the virus right now, that once we are over this period, the biggest challenge is keeping it on a stable level, so that as much as possible we can get that economic recovery happening. And when economic recovery happens, everyone benefits from that, whether you're in the workforce or not. And I think that probably the single biggest challenge really for the next year will be exactly this, is how do we manage this in a way that keeps us out of the big outbreaks, and that just means that we're just all going to have to learn to live very, very differently for a long while to come. That's not a nice message, but I'm sure no one thinks that this is all going to be over by the end of the year. Certainly, the sooner we can get that a vaccine that's workable and effective and efficacious, the better off we'll be. But I think I would like to say that there are other challenges, but I think that will be the single largest one that will be with us for a while to come.
Thank you, Minister. I think agreed. Collective effort is what we need to get where we need to be, and I can see that around the table just in terms of what we need to do in the energy sector. So that's fantastic. Minister, I think probably have if I could pose sort of probably three questions from the floor, if you had time for that. I'm wondering if people, any representatives would like to either put their hand up or put a question into the Zoom chat function. And Anne, you can probably help me to identify if anything pops up.
Ben Wilson's got his hand up there from AGN.
Great. Hi Ben.
Hi, thanks, Kate, and thanks, Minister. I really appreciate you taking the time. Question I've got, I think in all our businesses, I suspect there's a bit of a common theme in that we're all very conscious that perhaps a lot of the financial hardship that could have happened has been dampened and delayed by the various government assistance programs like JobKeeper and so on. And I think we're all sort of sitting thinking, wondering how things are going to play out, and is there going to be a sort of second financial wave? I don't know whether you've got any guidance for us, any government working assumption on what you're expecting to happen, and what your views are on a potential financial second wave of impact from this crisis.
Yeah, and this is something, thank you so much, Ben, and for the question. And this is something that has been really at times at the forefront of our thinking, but certainly always in our minds and sometimes at the back of it. But certainly when we were entering into COVID, I think it was a fair assumption that we were going to see through decisions around ceasing disconnections, JobKeeper and a variety of other government supports, that we would see a back ending and an accumulation of really dramatic difficulties in payment at a later stage, and so that was always a consideration. Then, of course, winter came, and then my thoughts were around, well, okay, gas consumption is going to go up in a residential home. Not so much in businesses, because businesses just don't have the throughput that they had before, but certainly at home. And that once those bills hit, then we would start to see some significant pressures. That hasn't, from the anecdotes that we've collected, from the information sharing that we've, and thankfully, that all of you have been happy to and willing to provide, we don't seem to have had some significant uplift in real dramatic impact. Now, that's not to say it's not there. It does concern me that the statistics that I mentioned earlier, that 31% of Victorians are worried that they won't be able to pay their bills. Now, it could be that they're just worried that from day to day they're just not sure what happens with lockdown. Or job seeker, and perhaps some of the concern is around decision points that government have to make, and the clock ticks in terms of when a policy is due to expire, and then governments come in a week before and say, well, we'll continue it on. So all of those things, I'm sure, add to anxiety. I suppose in a way that it hasn't played out to the full extent that some of us probably thought it would, but that's not to say that it may not be there, and there may not be some delayed impact. And that's why it's really critical for us to just keep monitoring this, keep sharing information, so that we can get a sense of what the trends are. And no doubt Ewa will talk about this too, in terms of trends and people, ringing and complaining. All of that information I've been looking at, poring over. The department has to, and we just can't see any significant spikes just yet. But the information sharing is really vital, so that if we start to see that there is a trend and it's heading in a particular way, it just gives us, all of us, the opportunity to have those discussions that we need to see what else can we do. And certainly for government, apart from that engagement across all of the stakeholders, to see whether there are other types of supports that we need to make available to people before they fall over a cliff. And certainly that's one thing that we want to avoid.
Yeah, thanks, Minister. I think we're all watching very carefully.
Yeah.
Thanks for your question, Ben. Minister, given the time, I'm perhaps wondering if we should move on with the agenda, unless I'm seeing any other hands waving in the air. I haven't at this point in time. Oh, have I got a couple of chats there? I'm not sure who DIMEJO is, but you've indicated you've got a question for the Minister.
Kate, it's Jeff Dimery.
Hi, Jeff.
Kate, it's Jeff Dimery. How are you?
How are you, Jeff? Good to see you.
Good afternoon, Minister. You too, Minister. Good luck with everything. I know there's a lot of pressure up there in Spring Street at the moment, so I don't envy you or the Premier. My question, first a statement and then a question, I guess, is that recently had a catch up with one of the big four banks just to get a read on what they were seeing from an economic situation. Perversely, whether it be due to job seeker, job keeper, people's ability to draw down on superannuation, etc. They've actually seen a spike in deposits on bank or in bank accounts. And given that the bank I was talking to represents about a third of the Australian public, I think we could take that as a sizable sort of survey. Combining that with, from an industry perspective, the fact that there's been undertakings and processes put in, so in dealing with customers, we're not disconnecting and the like. And I guess the third element to this is observing announcements by the publicly listed energy companies recently, AGL and Origin, and their outlooks. Just make a point, I suppose, that this isn't easy, and that we are, as well as considering customers, we have various stakeholders and customers right up, but managing a workforce that is working from home and suffer from all the same anxieties. I guess the point I really want to stress here is that we need what we can, but we also need to be very, very cognizant of any requirements being placed on, any incremental requirements being placed on businesses at this, because, and others can speak for themselves, but certainly from a Melinta perspective, our tolerance to deal with these things is really, really being stretched. So, if it's essential, we need to do it, then obviously we need to do it. But I guess I'm just voicing that, they are unprecedented times. We're in uncharted waters, and certainly want you to know that there's not a lot of bandwidth left, quite frankly. So hopefully this doesn't continue for too much longer.
Yeah, Jeff, thank you, and look, I very much appreciate the sincerity and frankness of that comment, and I'm absolutely certain that everyone else at the round table is in agreement with you, and I don't want this opportunity to go by without me really quite genuinely giving my appreciation for the fact that this is tough for all of you. It is very tough for all of you, and I appreciate that it gets to a point where there's not much more room for give, and I understand that, and I appreciate that. We want to, and it's going to be really critically important that we just keep our dialogue up. We hope that we get through this period. Things are trending well in Victoria, which is good, but we're nowhere near sort of saying that we're going to be free of the worst of it in a couple of weeks or so. But I do also, though, want to also indicate my appreciation of the fact that you are managing your own workforces as essential services. You've got your own challenges, ensuring that you don't actually have any, I suppose, systemic weaknesses that or breakdowns that could then see, an eruption of COVID impacting your workforce, because that then adds a whole number of other complications to your ability to deliver an essential service. So, so I appreciate that, Jeff, absolutely. And I think the key here is that we just keep sharing the information that we need to, and make sure that we have strong dialogue around any other changes that may need to be made, or whether there are alternatives to those that are less cumbersome, if you like, on businesses, if the event arises that we need to go down that road.
Thanks, Minister, and thank you, Jeff. I can just see one more question's been posed by Phil Baxter from Win Connect. Phil, did you want to ask a last question of the Minister?
If I can unmute myself. Yes, thank you for joining us, Minister, and very much appreciate everything that everyone's doing in hard times. My question was maybe a little bit out of your jurisdiction, but certainly with regards to stimulating the economy, is there any talk and any thoughts from the government on international students being allowed back into the country it's obviously not going to happen now, but let's say
Yeah.
for the start of the next university year.
Yeah, look, there's no new information that I can share with you. I think it's fair to say that when we ended up faced with the decision about stage 4 lockdowns, then a lot of effort had to go into arresting the spread of the virus, etc., and less so on the stimulus side of things. But look, it is a known fact that Victoria, I think, is the single largest exporter of education, and that means, of course, international students coming to Victoria is really vital to our state in terms of this economic dividends that come from that. I can't say to you now what the plans are around that. I think it is probably fair to say that it's far too early to be able to make any pronouncements with any degree of certainty, given the situation that we're still in. But it certainly occupies the government's thinking, as it does in other sectors with respect to the need to have some very strong economic recovery. So I'm pretty confident that the Minister for Education is focused very clearly on what are the plans that will need to be put in place once we're in a position to be able to see more students coming back, hopefully.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Phil. Thank you, Minister. I wonder whether we leave it there. Thank you for those questions, and thank you again, Minister, for making the time to be with us today. You're most welcome to stay for the next session if you have time, but completely understand if you've got other commitments. So thank you again for making the time, Minister.
Thank you.
I'd like to give the roundtable now a bit of an update on what's been happening at the Commission and what we've been doing, what we've learnt, and what's coming up on the horizon. This morning you might have seen the latest energy data release that shows the impact the coronavirus pandemic is having on Victorian households and small businesses. This data was collected before the introduction of stage 4 restrictions on the 5th of August, so the impact of the further lockdown is not yet clear. But what last month's data showed us is that during July, fewer households were reaching out to you, the energy businesses, for help. It also showed that the proportion of residential customers who cannot pay at all had fallen to its lowest level since April. This could mean the situation for households stabilised somewhat in July, or it could be a lull in the storm, and we won't know until we see some more data. The July numbers did, however, show a significant deterioration for Victoria's small businesses who have fallen further behind with their bills. Small businesses in assistance programs are falling further behind, with average arrears for electricity growing by 20%, and the situation is even worse for gas, with average arrears growing 30% between April and the end of July. Additionally, the amount being deferred by small businesses to pay later has also increased by 5% for electricity customers and 12% for gas between June and July. And these numbers are a bit of a worrying indicator of emerging hardship that could just be the tip of the iceberg, and we've spoken about that at the last two roundtables. Just wanted to make a few comments perhaps on disconnection. My fellow commissioners and I have been very pleased to note that on the whole the sector is continuing to support customers by not disconnecting for non-payment and offering a range of help to those who are struggling. And in relation to disconnection, and as confirmed in our letters, the first one was the 28th of April and again recently on the 7th of August, we really expect retailers and distributors alike to be mindful of the health and safety implications of stage 4 restrictions. So can I thank you for your cooperation in adopting the processes set out in our recent letter during these unprecedented times in the interests of all Victorian consumers. We really appreciate it. The importance of ensuring that customers are appropriately supported in managing the energy bills has therefore never been more important. So we really expect you to have effective strategies to engage with your customers as required by the Payment Difficulties Framework. So can I urge you to and I know many of you are doing a lot of work to make sure that you are doing what the PDF requires. We've seen that within the Pulse Check audit we did recently. So our request to you is to work together to ensure that as a sector, everyone's working together to ensure you're meeting your obligations. And as always, please feel free to reach out to Sarah, Aaron and the team if you have any concerns or queries about those obligations and changing circumstances. We really encourage that ongoing dialogue so that we can understand the challenges you're facing and you know, what we perhaps might need to be doing to move with the times. So let's have that conversation as an ongoing dialogue. On a positive note, I wanted to talk to you about some of the new consumer survey data, which shows that energy retailers on the whole are really doing your bit in supporting customers at this time. So that's very pleasing. We did a survey of 626 Victorians conducted for us by Roy Morgan as part of additional research being coordinated by the Consumer Policy Research Centre. And the survey showed that while 21% of Victorians are concerned about their ability to pay their energy bills, just 17% tried to find a better deal in the past 4 months. A little bit more on the data. Of the 11% of Victorians who contacted their retailer, the vast majority, about 86%, were offered help. So that's fantastic. From arranging a better energy deal to offering more flexible payment plans and information on applying for government assistance grants. So for us, this is a really positive sign. That retailers are taking your obligations seriously to support customers experiencing payment difficulties. A few words on the pulse check. The result was largely borne out, that positive result was largely borne out in the results of our recent pulse checks we conducted to confirm that retailers have systems to support customers as required by the PDF. And the results of the pulse check enabled us to really assess the ability of energy retailers to support customers experiencing vulnerability during this time. So I'd really like to acknowledge the positive response of many of the energy retailers, but also remind retailers of the need to continue monitoring those trends in the customer data, which we're finding invaluable, and to report this data as well as potential compliance breaches or challenges that you're facing to us. Those results really allow us to continue to evaluate the effectiveness of our protections for customers experiencing payment difficulty and also family violence. I just wanted to say that we use that information really to inform how we engage with you and any educational activities that we can take part with you going forward. So as you all know, over the past 5 years, the Commission has demonstrated our role in supporting consumers experiencing vulnerability across our regulatory work through various reform programs. The PDF and our award-winning family violence reforms have really been some of the highest profile and, more importantly, really effective in reducing that customer harm. And those reforms, as you know, have been carefully designed with extensive engagement with you, our key stakeholders, to ensure we have in place those protections and support for consumers experiencing vulnerability. And I spoke with the water sector at a forum earlier this week as we announced that the policy approach and principles agreed to by the National Cabinet in April have actually been enshrined in our water customer service codes. So we've been doing a lot of work in water as well. And I took the opportunity at that forum to make the point, as I have in previous energy forums, that we expect customers who can pay their bills should completely continue to do so. And I also took the opportunity to reiterate the importance of existing customer protection provisions, in particular protections in place for customers affected by family violence. So obviously we're very mindful of the reported increase in family violence incidents through the coronavirus pandemic and the impacts that's having on your customers. So the shared commitment that we made together to support customers affected by family violence when those new rules came in earlier this year has never really been more important. So as I reminded the water businesses this week, our expectation is that you meet your obligations related to family violence, and that remains unchanged. And I just wanted to acknowledge the work that you and your staff have done in that really important area to date. Now to today's roundtable session, enough from me. At this point in the roundtable, we wanted to go around the room like we have on the last two roundtables to hear firsthand from you about what's happening for your business and your customers. I've given sort of, and I'm not sure what the time is, 3:42, probably tracking all right, given each sort of group 5 minutes, so when you get your turn, perhaps think about what's been raised before and whether or not you'd like to add another topic or move on to new ground. So if we could take the small retailer group first, maybe I'll just read out the retailers I have in the room. Hopefully I haven't forgotten anyone, and anyone who wants to make some reflections, raise some concerns, please put your hand up and let's have a discussion. So First Energy, Blue NRG, CovaU, Glowbird, Tasgas, WindConnect, Elysian, Energy Locals, Power Club. I hope I haven't forgotten anyone. But in that group of retailers, we're really keen to hear your thoughts and any reflections or concerns. And either wave your hand physically or put your hand up in the chat mode.
No.
Anything that's anything that's changed since we met with you a couple of months ago that you'd like to either add to, new issues, reinforce other ones you've already made? And if not, maybe we can move on. And can I also remind you that the Slido with the prompts are there too. So if there's any other comments you want to make to some posed questions there, please feel free to do that in the meanwhile. Liz, Melanie, you've just let me know that you can't stay for the whole meeting. If you're under a time pressure and you wanted to say something before you went, I wonder if you're still there, Liz.
I think she's dropped off.
Liz has already had to go. I was too late. All good. All right. Maybe I'll move on to medium-sized retailers then and see if there are any reflections anyone wants to make. Sarah McNamara, you look like you would like to make a comment.
Well, I'm not sure if you prefer to leave. If you prefer to leave industry associations till the end, Sarah, I totally understand. But otherwise, I'd be happy to give you some.
I can't hear you very well, Sarah.
Oh, right.
Oh, that's better. That's
yeah,
better.
That's better. Apologies. Yeah. I just said I'm happy to speak now, or I can wait until after you've gone around the room with retailers individually.
I did have an allocated spot for you, but you're welcome to take it now.
Okay. I wanted to mention, just from the perspective of the industry, that I think we're all very appreciative of the feedback and the verbal assurances we have from both you and your team and the Minister that retailers are really doing all they can to support customers during these really difficult times. And as Jeff Dimmery pointed out earlier, that comes with its own cost, both financial and to health and wellbeing of our staff, who are all very stretched as well at the moment. One thing I would like to offer as perhaps some constructive feedback, though, that is an issue of ongoing concern for my retail members, is we did hear 2 months ago at the last roundtable that the ESC was very keen to make decisions based on evidence and also to really focus on having appropriate consultation processes with the industry. And of course, we're absolutely on the same page as the ESC when it comes to those principles, because we believe that results in better outcomes. The challenge for us is that since that last roundtable, we've had a couple of instances of decisions coming out that have been, frankly, surprising to us, and additionally not being demonstrated to have perhaps an evidentiary base, and we haven't been consulted in the lead up to it. Now, I'm thinking, of course, of the coronavirus protections draft decision, appreciating that we now get an opportunity to consult and give feedback, but once the draft decision is in place, it is harder to have a conversation, and we start from a position of opposition quite naturally once it's out there. And ideally, I think we would be delighted to have conversations with the ESC whilst draft decisions are being formulated, and particularly during these difficult times, to look at the content of these matters and ask ourselves whether they are based on evidence, whether they will benefit consumers, and whether the industry is able to implement them without placing undue cost on consumers or undue cost and stress on retailers, particularly smaller ones. And the second note I'll mention was a letter that came out to CEOs, I think it was last Friday, effectively extending the ban on disconnections past the state of emergency in Victoria timeframe through to the 31st of October. And I mean, look, no retailer wants to be disconnecting at the moment, and really they aren't. I mean, it's more than, I think you used the phrase in the main, it's more than in the main. It's universally the case across all retailers that they are not seeking to disconnect customers, and we all understand the difficulties being the pandemic. But to sort of, there are some requirements in that decision that really do place a huge onus on retailers to ring and contact customers to inquire as to their health and safety, then distributors have the same responsibility. And that seems problematic to us, not that we want to disconnect. The time frame seems problematic, and we have a question mark over, and it would have been much more desirable to have had a conversation with the ESC before receiving that, essentially a decision from the ESC. And we're always here to have those conversations whilst decisions are being formulated and considered.
Thanks, Sarah. I welcome the opportunity to hear these reflections from you as the peak body and retailers and distributors directly. So this is exactly what this forum is intended to do. I will say that in terms of the timing of some of the matters we've had to progress very quickly, that in an ideal world we would have much longer to consult, and we've had to possibly consult on a very restricted time frame in order to get these protections in place for customers. I'd also say that Commissioners are always very intent on striking that balance between the right protections in place for consumers that don't place an unwieldy burden on businesses. So that is something that we are assessing on a continual basis. And even though our long-term objective is to protect the interests of Victorian consumers, the impact on businesses is very much front of mind, particularly at the moment. I would say on the disconnection aspect, I do know that there's been a number of discussions between our staff, AEC, retailers and distributors, and in fact, I've really welcomed the fact and been pleased to hear that distributors and some retailers have been reaching out directly to us, which prompted all of that. And I guess monitoring the data at the same time gives us a picture of what needs to happen in an unprecedented time when otherwise we wouldn't have to be making those very, very hard decisions. I would say too that that further advice of August is not a ban on disconnections. So I think the focus on getting that confirmation from customers about the health and safety aspects of a disconnection is something that we really appreciate, a coordinated response between retailers and distributors. The other aspect of that, I think it really highlights the importance of the payment difficulty framework, and that, what I said before was that effective engagement between retailers and their customers to make sure that the assistance is there to keep those, those arrears in check and payment plans offered and flexible assistance offered. So if that payment difficulty framework is working and that assistance being offered, I would hope that we wouldn't ever get to the point where the level of engagement doesn't mean that a customer is disconnected. But it's a very difficult time. I know there are difficulties with customers perhaps not wanting to engage at a time like this. So one of the questions later on today, I think, really was posed to try and understand from the business's perspective, how best can we try and engage customers at a time like this. So we are always open to understanding creative ways, innovative ways to make sure that customers know the assistance is there and feel like they can reach out. So I'd really like to focus on that later on in the forum today to get some ideas or reflections from the sector. But thank you, Sarah. I do always appreciate being told if perhaps the other side of the equation doesn't feel like they're being heard, because that's never our intention. We'll take that on board, but also I guess we're in the realisation of this time not being normal. So we have worked, I guess, that draft decision through in a way that really tries to minimise the impact on businesses and maximise the protections and assistance for customers. So we're hoping to release that in the next week or so. So we'll keep you posted. Thanks very much, Sarah. I wonder now if I could turn to medium-sized retailers. So I have a list of Amaysim, Momentum, Tango and Sumo. Do any of those businesses like to put their hand up and make comment or reflect?
I'm happy to make a few comments if you like, Kate. It's Amy here.
It's Amy.
Look, I think the one piece that we sort of as a collective can't drop our eye off is some of the larger customers who don't qualify for assistance under the payment difficulty framework. So I'm talking, large kind of C&I customers who, particularly in Victoria, who are kind of finding like they've got nowhere to go. So we're we're providing assistance as best we can, but they don't qualify for any inadequate relief packages and are quite distressed. I might just turn my video off because I think you might be struggling to hear me. Who are quite distressed at the state of their businesses because of how the closures are impacting them. So I just think, I don't know if others on the call are experiencing that sort of issue, but it is something that I think we can't forget about in this discussion. The other point I'd make is echoing Jeff's comments. You know, as a business that's largely Victoria based, my team are pretty fatigued. The tank is very, very low. Motivation is low, and folks are struggling with, especially the frontline worker, with balancing homeschooling, taking customer calls all day. It's very, very, very tough for people. So we're being very creative around how we're rostering teams and trying to work through best we can. But yeah, I very much am supportive of Jeff's comments. We need to be very mindful about changing processes or anything that impacts frontline staff. We need to be very mindful of that.
Thank you, Amy. I think we're all having those challenges with our staff and making sure that their wellbeing is as best as it can be at this time. And we're all working very hard across the sector, businesses included. So I acknowledge that we're all in the same boat in that sense. So the customer service staff do an incredible job to be able to hear what they hear at the end of the line and try and give that assistance. So I appreciate and acknowledge those efforts. Wondering with CNI businesses, what sort of assistance are they asking for, or what are you able to give at this time?
Well, in our case, we're offering payment plans and stretching those as much as we can. But you know, some of them are expecting, you know, for us to do full write-offs, and are quite quite challenged by the fact that that's the only kind of way we can go.
Thank you very much, Amy. I have to say too, with the decision coming out next week, we were very concerned to be able to, and I'd heard from the industry last round table that you wanted to be able to flexibly provide assistance to businesses. So we didn't want to have a framework that was either unwieldy to put in place and removed that innovation and that ability for you to be flexible with your business customers. So you'll see more of that next week, but that's certainly something we've taken on board from the consultation we had on that draft decision.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, Amy. Anyone else from medium-sized retailers? Not seeing any waving hands or hands in the list. Anne, no, good. All right, we can always come back if someone has another reflection to make. So maybe I'll turn to the large retail group. So who would like to make a reflection or comment or query? I think Liz from AGL's left us already, but Energy Australia, I can see we've got Mark and Natalie on the line, Keith from Origin, we've got Lumo and Red Energy, we've got Simply Energy, could be James is there, and Alinta, I know we've got Jeff on the line as well. So any comments, reflections, questions from that group of retailers?
I'm happy to jump in, Kate. Mark from Energy Australia. Thanks for the opportunity to say a few words. Look, just to reiterate Amy and Jeff's points around the toll it's taking on our team. Stage 4 lockdown's hard for everyone involved, and it's hard because it's unpredictable too. When you do have a kid who just turns around and needs some help immediately, or you're caring for someone. We've also got loneliness issues. We've had a number of instances where some of our team have been hospitalised for various reasons. I'm sure everyone's going through all of those issues. So the approach I think we're all adopting is flexibility. So if someone's just not available, they're not available, and we just re-roster, we make things work as best as possible without them. We can see the lockdown's challenging customers too. It is a slower burn than originally thought, but there's a lot of assistance that's adding up, as you said earlier. For us alone, we've done something like 50,000 payment plans in Victoria, 16,000 extensions. We have a slow burn increase in our hardship program, and the same approach as for our people. We're supporting in every way we can customers. Anyone who asks for help gets help. And one of the emerging things we find quite tough is when we do see the regulatory changes that are still coming through, and there are a few things coming through in Victoria, the distribution code, the back billing from 9 to 4 months. We don't see automatic extensions of time when we all of a sudden get hit with a stage 4 lockdown, but we're giving the flexibility to our team, which we think is the right thing to do. We're doing it to customers, which we think is the right thing to do. But if we then have hard deadlines that don't move, it just means that we're trying to make something work that ultimately it doesn't really work. So I guess my thought is that for the length of a stage 4 lockdown, it would be nice just to move all deadlines back around implementation for at least that long, plus a mobilisation period. And I know we do sometimes try and get into the detail around, well, is it a different team doing that, and are they really affected? But we're dealing with a global pandemic. The instances of what we see are really unpredictable, and sometimes I think you've just got to go top down and say, actually, we just need to move everything back a couple of months. And I think that would give much needed support to the sector so that we can continue to support customers and support our people. And then maybe just a last comment. Absolutely agree, disconnections at the moment don't make any sense in Victoria. We're not going to do them. But at a point in time when I'm hoping that I just look at the curves every day as everyone else does, and it looks like in about 3 weeks we might be in a much better place, and maybe we'll be back in stage 3, and then maybe we'll be back in stage 2 thereafter. And I guess in the letters recently, the balance between the onus on the customer to talk to us versus us having to find a way to talk to them felt quite tilted towards us having to talk to customers. And I think top down at the moment, yeah, fine, we just won't do disconnections because it doesn't make any sense. But as we come out of this, we think it's quite important, and the payment difficulties framework was one of the good things about it is it does have that engagement with customers. But the more we overlay requirements where we have to contact customers without any overlay on them, unfortunately there are some won't pays out there. And if they can get out by just not talking, then that's great for them if that's what their objective it is, but it's bad for everyone else because those people need a prod to pay so that everyone else doesn't have to pay for them. So I think it just as we think about the future, having some obligation on customers to talk to us, not all of us getting them to talk to us, is something where I think the pendulum needs to move back towards the centre a little.
Thanks very much, Mark. Two acknowledgements you made there, which probably affect a number of people around the round table. Yes, there's lots of homeschooling going on, including in my household. So that's certainly a juggle that many people around the table have, and amongst other worries that others must have about aged family members and whatnot, and that will affect all of your staff as well as ours. So yes, acknowledge that. Thank you for sharing the pleasing outcomes of the assistance you're providing to your customers. Those figures were mind-boggling, and the amount of time that must go into providing that assistance to customers is incredibly pleasing to hear, so thank you. I'm wondering, I'm hearing a lot today about the concerns and the challenges that businesses are having. We're having that too in the Commission. I think maybe the best way to document some of those concerns about regulatory changes coming into effect in the next little while might be to reach out to our team. I don't know whether you've done that already. I don't think I've seen anything documented, but Sarah, I'm wondering if just encourage businesses to formalise their request if there are any particular things during stage 4 lockdown, because this is unprecedented, and yes, I acknowledge that. Let's have a discussion.
Absolutely. I think most have my email address, so email me directly or give me a call, and I would be very, very happy to have a conversation regarding timeframes.
Thanks, Sarah. Mark, just on your last point about disconnections too, that letter was further advice. It wasn't a ban on disconnections, but I am pleased to hear the approach of Energy Australia to that during this, what I say, unprecedented time. I think I do and am aware of customers who avoid engagement. So even though businesses are reaching out, they just don't get anything back from the customer. The PDF wasn't designed so that you can never disconnect. So I guess the focus then in the aftermath will be on how businesses go about that best endeavours. And if you can't contact them by phone, there are ways you then follow that up to make sure that information has been given. So I won't go through all the intricacies of the PDF right now. You all know it well, but I think I think it's always important to remember that it's not a backstop to never being able to disconnect. So we just want to see those best endeavours and the I guess the ways in which businesses go about trying to engage with the customer when they're not engaging are really important. So thank you, Mark, for highlighting that. Anyone else from the large retail group?
Thanks, Kate. Maybe just a couple of comments to add to Mark's, which we support. We similarly feel sort of the burden of trying to instigate change, regulatory change, and there hasn't been a lot of relief from AEMO through their sort of roadmap process to try and perhaps allow a little bit more time for regulatory change implementation. It's really just picking up the disconnections point, and I guess there are two sort of obvious consequences. One is we're seeing those customers who are not using that prompt of a disconnection warning to engage with us are therefore not ending up in the right hardship program. And secondly, we're starting to see little pockets of bad debt therefore grow around those groups of customers who are not engaging. By and large, it's kind of the same message as was a couple of months ago. We are seeing good payment behaviour from residential customers, but we are seeing growing bad debts, not surprisingly, from small businesses.
I'm just wondering, thank you very much, Keith. I'm just wondering, in the first round table, there was a signal from businesses about the impact of increasing customer debt on your bottom line. We heard that from the start, so you've just picked up on that aspect again.
Yeah, I think we wrote off about 35 million yes, as an additional provision for bad debt, and that was announced in July, so that was relating to June. The position, of course, will have moved further by now.
Thanks for sharing that, Keith. Any other questions?
It's, maybe it's on that, a couple of takeouts from us. One is, although our cash receipts down, they're not down as far as we thought they'd be. I guess the lookout for us is that, as has been mentioned by a couple of others, without taking any recovery actions, what we're seeing is that customers are not entering into hardship programs. They're basically sitting back, and we think that that's going to cause an issue down the track when, you know, we go back to pursuing outstanding amounts and things like that. So it's definitely a watch out from us. So yeah, so bad and doubtful debts not as high as we thought they'd be, although we don't think we're clear of that issue. Maybe it's more a timing issue. And also that, you know, customers seem, a lot of customers, or many customers, I won't say a lot of customers, are happy to enter deferred payment plans and things, but we think that's going to cause some issues down the track when they ultimately have to pay. And just, you know, in line with what Mark said, certainly from a Lintus perspective, between now and the end of the calendar year, at a minimum, we're not looking to reinstigate anything like disconnection. So we understand that, you know, they're exceptional circumstances and we've got to behave accordingly.
Thanks, Jeff, and I certainly acknowledge the effect on businesses by taking that stance during this time, but it's appreciated. I should also just tag on to something Keith just said too then about regulatory requirements and any other plans for any interventions at this time. We don't have any other plans for interventions at this time. That's why we're collecting the data that we have so that we can make sure that everything's nothing is required at the moment. So what I guess Mark was talking about was implementation of regulatory requirements that have already been in the pipeline. But I just wanted to give a sense too that we don't have a whole bag of things we're going to pull out of our hat and say you've got to do X, Y, and Z. We really see the value in collecting that data at the moment, keeping this dialogue with you so that we can understand what that looks like. And if we do need to do take other steps, then we will talk with you about that and move that through the process. Any other, thanks very much, Jeff. Any other comments from large retailers? All looks good. All right. I might just move on to network distributors. So Gemina, City Power, Powercor, United Energy, AusNet, Multinet, Australian Gas Networks and AGIG. I can see a few faces around the table, and I know Andrew Dillon's here as well. So Does anyone from the distribution businesses like to make some comments? Hi, Ben. How are you going?
Good, thanks, Kate. Thanks for the opportunity to make a comment. I'll just add a few things. I think for the gas networks, so AGM Victoria and Multinet Gas, which is our two networks in Victoria, along with AusNet and also Gemina on the gas side in Sydney, we've extended our retailer assistance program on a voluntary basis, and hopefully we've listened to some of the feedback from the first time around the hoops we put in place for people to qualify for assistance. So we've made it a lot simpler this time around. It's a blanket 20% extended credit to small retailers to give them that cash flow leave. That's in place to the end of the year. So hopefully that's something which is helpful. I'd also like, I think, to recognise the work the Energy Charter's doing at the moment. That's supposed to be an initiative where you get the whole sector, retailers, networks, generators coming together to try and do the right thing, be focused on the customer. And I think some of the Better Together initiatives and the We've Got You initiative that the Charter's come out with, again, hopefully is helpful and seems to have gone down quite well. I'll I think, echo the comments from the retailers around impact on staff. What I'd say for the network businesses, clearly we've got a lot of people still out in the field. And I think what's been very good is that even with the stage 4 lockdown, there's been no suggestion that we should be stopping any of our work. And we very much support that position. We have the view that everything we do, including scheduled maintenance, mains replacement and so on, actually is important work and needs to continue and can be done safely. And if there's a silver lining from any of this stuff, it's actually the streets are emptier. We're doing mains replacement in the CBD of Melbourne at the moment, and we're ahead of schedule because it's, you know, we never would have thought it would be so easy to work in the CBD as it is now. And of course, if we were not allowed to do that work, that would hit supply chains. It would destroy jobs in the supply chain, and those would be gone. The people would move on, and we'd never be able to stand it back up again. So I think we're very pleased about that. In the middle of all this coronavirus, it's also the case that we have a 1 in 10 winter in terms of cold temperatures in Victoria. And we also have had about twice as much rain year to date as would be normal, as would be average. The cold winter puts additional pressure on people's bills, I'm sure, because of the volume effect of that. And also we're conscious that in particular in our Multinet network, where we've still got 1,700 kilometres of old cast iron mains, some of it up to 100 years old, we get a lot of water and mains jobs at this time of year. And we're very focused on trying to fix those issues, trying to keep customers updated. And what we find, as always, is it's the information flow that they want. Right? If there's a problem and there are people working, they want to know what's going on. So we've put a lot of focus on that, and our people, even though they're working from home in lockdown and all that kind of thing, are putting a lot of effort into those comms. And of course, we're also conscious we're liaising with ESC and with EWOV to keep you guys up to speed on what's going on, given the high volume of complaints around water and mains. So whilst there's the COVID, everything else still goes on and has to be dealt with. And actually, there are some particular challenges this year from weather, temperature and rainfall.
Thanks very much, Ben. It's nice to hear there's some silver lining that you're able to progress some of your work in much more timely fashion than you thought you would be able to. So there's nice to always see a positive.
It's a small one, but yeah, that's right.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ben. Any other network distributors? And if not, I can see Andrew there. How are you going, Andrew?
I'm all right. Good afternoon, Kate and everyone. Probably not a lot to add to what Ben was saying. Obviously, on the electricity side, there's also been an extension of the voluntary package in Victoria that ended at the end of June, so that's continuing on. And for non-Victoria, there's the rule changes come through the AMC along similar lines. In addition to Ben's points on the gas side, I think one thing to keep in mind in the electricity space is we're still having some concerns, although they don't seem to be as bad, with people getting particularly frustrated by planned outages while they're in lockdown. But one thing that is now becoming a particularly resource challenge making sure that the critical bushfire preparation in particular work gets done before the bushfire season. So we're certainly seeing some challenges in that space. Indeed, we're seeing a bushfire going in New South Wales right now, I think, which is quite remarkable. That's probably the key things from our end, Kate.
Thanks very much, Andrew. I should mention too the voluntary package in Victoria. We were very happy to meet with distributors and talk that over to make sure that we didn't need to come in over with a regulatory intervention if the package provided what the AEMC rule did or beyond. So I was very pleased to have those discussions with the distributors and have that ongoing dialogue that meant that we don't have hopefully a job to do and they can go about making sure that they can provide the assistance that's required in Victoria. So thank you again for distributors for that. I think unless anyone's hands are up, we've probably finished that part of the agenda, but I've really valued that discussion and hearing directly from you. So thank you. I wonder if we just move to the Slido poll. I just was trying to see what some of our answers to some of the questions on Slido are. Everyone's had a chance to put some comments on there, and I'm just waiting for the team to help me to see. Here we go. Thank you, Aaron. So maybe I'll just reiterate. I'm pretty sure that everybody can see the answers on Slido, but this was just an opportunity for us to pose a few questions. Question one was, what concerns do you have for your business in the next 3 to 6 months? There were a number of responses in relation to increasing customer debts, staff welfare and customer outcomes. Can everybody see those responses on Slido? So I'm not necessarily going to read them out word for word. Did anyone want to add anything else in terms of reflections to that question? No, sounds good. The second question, I'm just having trouble seeing where they are. There we go. Question 2. Thank you, Lisa. How can we, the regulator, and you, the energy industry, work together better to develop confidence in the community that customers will be supported to remain connected? I think we've possibly talked a lot about that. So unless anyone wanted to add something to the connection issue now, we can probably move on. And the third question. Just waiting for the screen to come up. Did have an answer to that second question that you're saying the forums are helpful. So I'm hoping that you are finding that it's a good way to connect and hear what's going on. And the third question is an open one. Do you have any further questions for the Commission? And perhaps while I wait for those, I wondered if I'd just throw the floor open to my fellow commissioners as well. Satish, Simon and Rebecca are with us today. After you've heard the discussion today, is there anything else you'd like to ask everyone around the table while I look at question 3? Hi, Simon.
I had a question about ERGs. We had a water roundtable yesterday, and you might be aware the water sector's been pretty proactive in some water companies will complete their ERG applications. And they also observed that staff members found it quite satisfying to be helping customers actually get additional funding from the government when they're in distress. I'd be interested in what the experience has been with ERGs recently, if there's been any difference in the experience in the energy sector.
I always call on Amy when it comes to the ERGs question, because a number of times, Amy, you've reflected on how your business approaches those applications. Is there anything you'd add to Simon's question, not to put you on the spot?
I don't have a top of my head answer on numbers of ERGs that we're completing, but we're still progressing with exactly as you described, Simon. We're completing them on behalf of customers, and certainly the feedback we're getting from customers and staff, that is that satisfying feeling. and it's great for us as an energy retailer as well for obvious reasons. So that's working well.
It's good to know it's not just a water sector experience. Thanks for that, Amy.
Sarah, did you want to add something to that?
Perhaps to be a little cynical, Chair, I think that one of the challenge with the ERGS program and the reason it was so problematic was because of difficulties within the department and how it was structured. And retailers, I guess, are now being asked to compensate for those issues by filling out the forms with customers, and that's fine for some retailers, and it can, as Amy mentioned, work very well for that customer relationship. But it can also impose a time cost and a cost on retailers that some smaller retailers may find challenging.
And we did talk about that at the last roundtable around looking at how we could better design or how could we work with DHS to get a better process around.
Yeah, it was a very
that work.
It was a very frustrating bottleneck, I guess, of applications, and retailers are really carrying the can with customers in relation to that. Any way we can avoid those sort of issues in the future would be good.
Are you still seeing the bottleneck?
It's moving, but I think there are still issues.
Yeah, from an Energy Australia perspective as well, Sarah, I'd echo your comments. We do everything we can to complete the form with the customer at the time, but it can sometimes take 40 minutes up to an hour that we've got the customer trying to find the information, fill out the form. So it does take the call is longer. And when they can't complete the form, we then have to send it out to them, which then they can self-complete the remainder of the form, which just adds to the time and the bottleneck of getting the support they need. So it is, and yeah, the last roundtable we did talk about the improvements that we could make in somehow automation to reduce the burden on retailers, but also support the customer at the same time.
And I think this comes back to, again, that really desirable principle of evidence-based decisions, because as reflected in the draft decision, this new measure was reflected in the draft decision when it was released, and we're not aware of the evidence that there was a problem that the retailer contact with customers was the best way to resolve. There doesn't seem to have been any analysis of that being the best opportunity to resolve the issue, and it does come at a cost for retailers.
My only comment would be that we've positively seen a reduction in customers contacting us out of sheer frustration at not getting anywhere with either DHHS or energy retailers. So to the question about the bottlenecks, customers are definitely not as frustrated as they were a matter of months ago, because that was one of our key complaint drivers for a period of time. So it's great to see that the initiatives that have been put in place by the department and also energy retailers are reaping benefits for customers.
Thanks, Cynthia. I mean, ultimately, if we can get that ERG system working well, it benefits the customer. It also benefits the retailer because it goes straight off the debt that's already sitting there. So if we can make any improvements to ease that flow, let the flow keep going, then that's something we're very keen to keep talking with you about, particularly as time goes on. And perhaps, I'm not sure if DHHS is here today, but we'll certainly use this as a conduit to pass on any reflections we've heard today. I did have an interesting conversation with the water sector on Tuesday about this, and I tried to gauge how long their customer service staff would spend helping a customer fill out those ERGS applications from a water perspective. And Simon, can you remember what it was? It was 10 to 15 to 20 minutes perhaps each. I was rather surprised at how little time it seemed to take the water sector, but I'd be interested in any reflections on why, if that is what's experienced in the energy sector, and if not, I wonder why.
My recollection, Kate, was it was 10 to 15, and the thing that puzzled me was the one that was the most vocal about it was actually one of the smallest of our water retailers. So we know that some of the bigger water retailers are also very proactive in this area, but it was actually one of the small regional ones that was saying that was their approach. So it's a interesting question about, the ones you mentioned that take a long time, what the nature of that, why they're the outliers. And I think it is an important area to engage with DHHS on.
Yes, I mean, if we can have any ongoing role too, with any challenges you see in trying to be more proactive in getting customers to get those applications in, which will ultimately assist businesses, let's keep this discussion going so we can keep feeding this back to DHHS and see what else we can do to help make the system work better for everyone.
And Cher, I think I'd be reluctant to want to make assumptions about if things work a certain way for the water sector and their customers, that they would work similarly in retail energy. I feel like customers probably have quite a different view of energy retailers. They're possibly in a different mindset, and it's quite a different product and a different kind of market. So.
Thanks, Sarah. Keen to hear any of those differences in due course, and if we can sort of flesh that out and understand a little bit more about the experience of energy businesses in that context. I'm very happy to have that dialogue. Satish, you had your...
Yeah, thank you, Kate. Can I start by also acknowledging and thanking everybody from the industry for your feedback and time in this. It's genuinely appreciated, and I'm finding it really valuable to listen to some of the concerns that you've been expressing. One of the areas that I'd just like to ask further about is, given the importance of the payment difficulties framework, especially at the moment, but even in a general sense, is there anything from an industry perspective, any further guidance that the Commission can give in this area that the industry would like to get from us in relation to the payment difficulties framework? Or any clarity or clarification in terms of applying the payment difficulties framework at the moment? It may mean you need to speak to your frontline staff as well, obviously, and I do acknowledge that. And if that's the case and you have information provided up to you, obviously feel free to contact Sarah, as she's indicated, directly to provide that sort of feedback through to Sarah, and I'm sure it'll filter back up through to the Commission. But if there are any observations at the moment, I'd be very keen to hear them.
I'll make an observation. It's Jeff Dimery. Just that we've had a lot greater consultation with the ESC over the last certainly four months, maybe even a little bit longer than that. But you know, I just commend the ESC on that as the right approach in working with business, and certainly to your point about approaching and getting help from the team. Our experience over the more recent past has been the case in Alinta's situation. So, you know, if others are not doing that, I would encourage them to do that, and it's been very beneficial to her. Thank you. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Satish. Not sure there are any other hands up to respond to that, but certainly Commission's perspective on our communication with the sector at the moment is that if there's any uncertainty or ambiguity about some of your obligations, then we really want to have that dialogue with you so we can give the guidance and sort of have a powwow about what it looks like, so we can give the guidance you need to be able to meet your obligations. And if there are challenges with doing so, then it's really good to be aware of those. Any other questions from commissioners? I know Rebecca's on the line as well, but everything may have been covered unless I see you pop your hand up.
Hi, Kate. Just a quick one. Obviously, all of the retailers are providing extra data at the moment, and we really appreciate that. And I hope that you're seeing that as a helpful input into what an extra level of understanding we need at the moment, and a sense of urgency in terms of up-to-date information. And on that note, if there are other pieces of intelligence or trends that you're seeing, please don't hesitate to share those with us, because we are all trying to predict the uncertain future at the moment, and everything is helpful at this point. And thanks for coming along today.
Thanks very much, Rebecca. Before I note the time, it's already 4:27, the afternoon's gone quickly. Are there any other comments from the observers around the table that I mentioned earlier? Now would be the time if you wanted to reflect on anything. Otherwise, I'll move to wrap up the session. All good. All right. Well, I just wanted to recap some of the themes then that I've heard today around the roundtable. So thank you for sharing your reflections. So some of the key themes, certainly been an increase in customer debts and the effect on retailers of that. Payment plans and customers' expectations of full write-offs from customers are becoming slightly difficult. I've also heard you talk to us about regulatory change and the impact on your business. A request really to consider delaying some of the compliance deadlines and engaging in more consultation with the sector. Sarah, as you've pointed out, to make evidence-based decisions. We've heard what you've said today. Staff impacts, which I think affects everyone around the table at the moment. Retail teams are big and small, both are fatigued. Many complex issues to juggle, both mental and physical, and also managing customer outcomes. Heard about delivering safe outcomes in the lead up to summer, ageing infrastructure, balancing the impact of outages and supporting customers and communicating with them effectively. So thank you for sharing all of those reflections and comments today. So on that note, can I thank everyone for their time today? I've really appreciated that you've taken the time to be with us and have a really constructive dialogue today. I've been really pleased to be able to hear all of the thoughts you've had today. And I know, like us, all businesses are trying to work in new ways to look after your own staff, as we've heard, address customer needs at a really important time, liaise with government and other bodies. So I've been really heartened to hear that, you know, all of the businesses are really trying to put customers at the forefront of your thinking, trying to keep them connected at this time, and showing that you're as committed as we are to making sure there are those positive community outcomes in these difficult times. So thank you for your time today. I think there'll be a survey being sent around after today's session. So if there are any other reflections, comments, queries, unanswered questions that you have, please respond to the survey, or as I said, sorry Sarah, I'm saying email Sarah, Aaron of the team.
Yeah, please email or give me a call. I can put my mobile phone in the chat function, so please don't hesitate to give me a bell.
Thanks, Sarah, and also I'm very accessible too, so feel free to reach out. So thanks again, everyone. Take care during these times, and look forward to hearing some of the results on the survey, and hopefully we'll have another roundtable so we can pick up these themes at that time. In the interim, reach out if you need to. So thanks very much, everyone. Stay well.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.